Good afternoon, children. Let's continue reading and learning from page 150 of the lesson A Cry Against Exploitation. So, let us begin straight away from the lesson. Kailash took his first step in this direction by collecting school books from friends and acquaintances after the annual examinations and then distributed them to young children who wanted to study but could not afford buying those books. So, what did Kailash do? He was in his teens when he started his initial, very first steps at social work. So, what did he do? He collected books from acquaintances, that is, known people, people whom he knew, and then gave it to children who really wanted to study. Now, Kailash completed his graduation in electrical engineering from Samrat Ashok Technological Institute in Vidisha and later took up a job as a lecturer at a college in Bhopal. So, he completed his graduation, that is, he was an electrical engineer. And what did he do? In the year 1980, he started, but before that, he became a lecturer at a college in Bhopal. And then in 1980, he started the Bachpan Bachao Andolan. Now, this was a pretty big Andolan or a protest against child exploitation. So, let's see. Around the same time, he started a magazine, Sangharsh Jari Rahega, The Struggle Shall Continue, which documented lives of vulnerable people. So, what did he do? Around the same time, that is around 1980 itself, he started a magazine in which he probably edited or he wrote, which documented, which wrote about lives of vulnerable people, means people who were in need of special care, support, or protection because of age, disability, or risk factors of abuse or neglect, and therefore he started concentrating on these people. So he was shaken by the prevalence of child labor in India, and he was shaken, meaning he was very much annoyed, very much surprised by the way child labor was prevalent. So it continued, it existed in India. So it was a common practice in India, and it was commonly happening all around him. And the fact that acute poverty often forced poor people to repay their monetary debts through bonded servitude of their children. So what happened? There was a lot of things, in this kind of child labor. So a lot of things to be considered. So he was completely shaken. He saw all this and he was very much worried for the children of India. And what they did, because poverty pushed them, severe or drastic poverty. Acute means drastic, severe poverty forced these poor people to sell their children as slaves, or just bond or give a bond, or give a security for the payment of debts that they had taken already. They'll give away the children. So this was a practice. So it was a kind of security for the repayment of a debt or other obligations, maybe some money they had taken from the landlord or whatever. So this was called peonage or debt slavery or bonded labor. So in this a person had to pledge that he'll remain a slave, or he'll work for him if he is not unable to pay or not able to pay his debts. So this was the practice in India, and it was coming since ages. So it continued and it was all around, and he was very much worried for this. So in the year 1998, he led the global march against child labor, traveling through 103 countries and nearly 80,000 kilometers, and drew global attention to the grave issue of child labor and exploitation of deprived children. So he took out a global march, a march that in which he had covered almost 103 countries and nearly 80,000 kilometers. He went around. So it caught the global attention of all leaders around the world, and people, especially they also came to know about the child labor that is going around all over the world, so many parts of the world. So this kind of exploitation of deprived children, children who were underprivileged, so this kind of suffering of poor children, so this, for this cause, this movement, uh, people gave their attention, and this movement led to the adoption of child labor, International Labor Organization Convention 182 on the worst forms of child labor in 1999. So that means Satyarthi's march had been noticed, and because of the global attention on his cause, and a convention was called for the same in 1999. So he what he meant was that every child mattered, and therefore they need to go to school and not to work. So let's go on, continue from here. Kailash Satyarthi was instrumental in setting up the Good Weave International Foundation, a network of non-profit organizations aiming to end illegal child labor in the rug making industry. So he also started the setting up the Good Weave International Foundation. So this was a foundation helping out children in the rug making industry or the carpet making industry. So Kailash fought tooth and nail. Now this is an idiom. Tooth and nail means all out. He went all out. He fought a lot of odds to create awareness. Awareness about the extensive use of child labor and exploitation in the industry, to raise the stakes for the industry and to encourage the industry to manufacture rugs without rugs made without child labor. So what he did was, his aim was to see that children are not employed in the rug making industry, and without children rug making was done. So he said that they should raise the stakes. So raising the stakes here means for the industry. So what does it mean? It means increase the cost or risks or considerations involved in taking an action or reaching a conclusion for this kind of continued happenings in industries by exploitation of children. So Kailash was also deeply pained and affected by the inhuman behavior meted out to manual scavengers or Harijans by the upper class. Now manual scavengers are people or children. Scavengers actually, when we talk about animal scavengers, they are the meat eating or what we call the animals that eat meat, or they kill another animal and eat. They are known as the scavengers. But here manual scavengers are people or human beings put into this kind of a business, means to collect the human waste from the various places, drains or whatever, clearing drains and all. So this continues in India and many parts of West Asia. This still continues even to when we have reached the era where knowledge boom and all kinds of betterment in life goodies are there. Then still there are people who are carrying or waste on their heads and cleaning the drains manually. So this is very painful, and Kailash Satyarthi got all out to help the Harijans, or as the Mahatma Gandhi had given this name to the lower caste or the different underprivileged people at that time. The upper caste people considered them untouchables. And as we know, this had been a practice in India for several years, and Gandhiji had several fights and discussions and a lot of legislations made for them. Still, it continues in many parts of India and around the globe. So, in the year 1969, the birth centenary of the father of the nation was being celebrated, and political leaders across the spectrum, the colors, the different flags, or the different parties were making poor speeches full of passion, idealism, and sympathy. So, leaders were talking about big sympathy for poor people. They were talking about idealisms. They were talking about sympathy for them, passion that they are going to do this and that and all kinds of things for the poor. But then this fascinated the 15-year-old Kailash, who was then only 15 years and who wanted to become a politician. So he thought, good, politicians do work like this because they are giving so fiery speeches for the poor. So he was also fascinated by the speeches of the politicians to cure the vices, that is, the evils of the society, such as untouchability and child labor. So he thought at that small age of 15, he thought he should also get all out to clear or to finish off untouchability and child labor that still continues in India and a lot of other countries. The Harijans in Vidisha were not allowed to enter their homes through the front door as they were considered impure. And Harijans, although they were utilized in clearing the human waste from their toilets or from the upper caste toilets, still they were not allowed to go into the house from the front door. They were asked to go all around from the back door. As a tribute to Gandhiji, Kailash decided to use his idealism to turn the tide in favor of the socially excluded classes and organize a community dinner where food would be prepared and served by Harijans in a clean and hygienic environment. People from the upper caste and local political leaders would also attend. So Kailash decided that he would be so the best thing that he can do, instead of all these idealisms that they talk about, let us be practical. So what did he do? He decided to ask the people to come and have dinner or lunch at a gathering where only the Harijans will make the food. So you can see the scavengers here. These are poor people. They are the Harijans and working in a drain, cleaning the drain and clearing the clogged drain. So it's a very, very poor. See, he's been tied to something so that he doesn't fall down into the drain. And many a time mishaps also happen when people go into the drain, and because of that acidic smell, the smell of all kinds of acids inside, so they die. And sometimes they drown, and sometimes they even fall down and they are not lost and disappeared completely, not to be found. So these are very risky jobs which is still done by human, whereas in foreign countries only machines do all these kinds of things, if at all they have to do. So let's move on to the next one. So here we are. So they invited guests to partake the food and spread the message of social they spread the message of social equality. So that's over here. So the message of social equality. So many leaders and upper caste people gladly accepted the invitation to participate in the event. However, members of the Harijan community were very skeptical about the success of the function. So what happened? All the guests were called. The guests from various communities were called to attend. So they all came. Many leaders decided to come. So many leaders and upper caste people were they accepted the invitation to participate. They said, okay, fine, we'll come. So however, members of the Harijan community were very skeptical. Now, skeptical means they were doubtful. They had their doubts that whether these people will really attend or not. They are accepting the invitation, but sure enough, whether they would come or not, this is something doubtful about the success of the function. So after a great deal of persuasion, the young Kailash managed to convince a few ladies of the community to prepare food for the occasion. So the community the Harijan community, ladies from the Harijan community, they were also scared to make, because they were never asked to make food for higher classes, no? So they were also surprised, and they were scared whether they should go or not. They didn't have very good ideas about this. So Kailash and his friends had mobilized funds. So a lot of friends got together, and they made, mobilized means they gathered funds for this event, with which they purchased staples and vegetables for the event. Staples means rice and wheat, and vegetables for the event. So they made vegetarian dish for all the upper class Hindus. Now slowly minutes turned to hours, and soon it had become quite dark, and not a soul turned up for the dinner. So what happened? This was a dinner that they had prepared, and not a single soul from the upper caste had come to for their dinner, although they had accepted the invitation heartily. Kailash and his friends were more disheartened than the Harijan community, and every one of them was disheartened. The hypocrisy of the political leaders and the society at large were clearly exposed. So what happened? The hypocrisy, or the claiming of to be of higher standard, and all the passion that they had given, all the big lectures, the big call outs of the big speeches, that fiery speeches that they made, all that was exposed, was very clear, wide open. Everything was spread in front of everyone now. So this was hypocrisy of politicians made young Kailash furious. Furious means angry. So their hypocrisy, their show-offs at nothing, when they were really nothing, was all, empty promises for the poor. So a disappointed Kailash and his friends had to consume the food prepared for the occasion. So all his friends had to eat all that they had prepared well past midnight. They waited till midnight, nobody turned up, so they started eating the same food that they had made, so that the poor may not be disappointed. So as Kailash put the first morsel in his mouth, morsel means the first bite, or the first mouthful in his mouth, disappointment was writ large on his face, and he cried inconsolably. So what happened? There was a lot of disappointment writ large on his face, means very obvious. Writ large is a phrase which means very obvious, very clear on his face, that he was very absolutely disappointed, and then he started crying loudly. He was not to be inconsolably, meaning not to be consoled. So nobody could console him. It was very difficult to console him. This is what happened to him. So freeing children is a very small part of our work. The bigger challenges are rehabilitation as well as reintegration. So this is what he is talking about, bonded labor. Now we move on to the next one. The very fact that such an initiative was taken by Kailash, daring the society, was well appreciated by the Harijans. So the Harijans, of course, appreciated it. But although Kailash was very much disappointed. When Kailash went back home, he saw a furious crowd of upper caste Brahmins gathered in front of his house. So when he returned home, he saw a lot of Brahmins gathered in front of his house. His family was humiliated by the upper caste Brahmins. So he belonged to the Brahmin caste, and they were all very, very angry at his family, because Kailash had taken part in such a thing that was not at all good according to them. So they also thundered that Kailash had committed an unpardonable sin, and that the whole family would be excommunicated. So what did they thunder? Thunder means they shouted at Kailash that he had committed an unpardonable sin, that it is a sin that will never be pardoned or never be forgiven. And that the whole family would be, they threatened that the whole family would be excommunicated, meaning expelled from the community, sent out from the community, would be sent out from the community because they have behaved like this, which they should not have. After heated dialogue, the upper caste community ordered his family members to disown Kailash. Number one, they said that they should disown Kailash. Point number one. And number two, shift him to a separate room in the backyard of their house or face social boycott by the society. So, two things they have to do. Number one, to disown Kailash. Number two, to send him into a separate room in the backyard of their house, not in the front portion, but send him at the backyard where he'll live there or stay there, whatever, but he should not come from the front side. So he was instructed not to enter the house from the front and was given separate utensils also. So his parents gave him separate utensils or to prepare cook food. So he tossed around the whole night in that dark and dingy room, and the room where he was given place was a dark room and a dingy, a small, very small room to rest in the night. So his anger at the feudal society and political class knew no bounds. Another idiom, knew no bounds, means he was so angry. His anger, because he was a youth at that time, at the feudal society, the society that always was exploiting the lower caste, and the political class knew no bounds. So he was very, very angry. And his anger at his people and also at the community knew no bounds, meaning there was no limit of his anger at them. So he made up his mind that a very day that he did not belong there, and that he did not belong there and did not want to be associated with such a hypocritical community. So he decided that today itself he'll leave. He doesn't belong to that place, and therefore he will leave that place because it doesn't really is. It's a show off community which states that they have high standards but will never follow it. So he was miffed, very much annoyed that the community and his family had made him an outcast, and decided to forsake his name. And this made him throw away his surname, which was Sharma at that time. A few years later, he dropped his family name and changed his surname to Satyarthi, a seeker of truth. So, what is the meaning of Satyarthi? The meaning is a seeker of truth, and therefore that is the name he owned. I mean, he took up. Instead of his family name Sharma, he took up Satyarthi as the surname. Thus, a shining star was born, and thus began Satyarthi's life. So, his own people forsake him. And in the last 35 years, Kailash Satyarthi has successfully rescued over 83,000 children and adults from child labor, trafficking, and other exploitative situations in India. And so 35 years on, and Kailash Satyarthi still continues to work among children, and he has saved more than 83,000 children and adults from child labor, trafficking, and other such unfair situations in our own country. So here, children, we end up the story. No, there's more. And we move on. You see he's with the children here, and then his interventions have positively impacted the lives of thousands of children working in carpet weaving, bangle making, firecrackers, circus industry, and lock making, brassware products, agricultural labor, sari embroidery, stone quarries where stone is chipped and taken away, and brick kilns where bricks are made. So besides domestic child servitude, so besides being servants in the households across the world, so he is still continues to help children in these who are employed in these industries. So for his exemplary contributions to the society, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 2014, and you can see the picture over here. He's holding his Nobel Peace citation and the award, the gold medal. So one of them is the 100 million for 100 million campaigns, wherein he endeavors that 100 million privileged youths and children across the world support their 100 million not so privileged peers to break out of slavery, danger, and violence. So these were the campaigns that Satyarthi worked in. The second one is the 12,000 kilometer Bharat Yatra from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, which he led along with child abuse survivors. So he made a march all over from Kanyakumari to from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. The movement received unanimous support, so a lot of support from all angles. Everyone supported him, from civil society organizations that worked for the underpoor, and the movement, politicians across party lines, bureaucrats, high government officials who are in for making good laws for the society, celebrities and faith leaders, and all these organizations and everyone led to the Union Cabinet approving the Trafficking of Persons Prevention, Protection and Rehabilitation Bill in 2018 in February. So he made a difference in the legislation of India itself. That is a big achievement by Kailash Satyarthi. With each milestone, Kailash Satyarthi works harder to live up to a promise he once made to himself. Why does he do all this? The reason is, he says, I will see the end of child slavery in my lifetime. So Kailash Satyarthi says that he promised himself a single thing, that he will see the end of child slavery in his lifetime itself. So for this, he is working every day. He is working. And children, I just want to tell you, it says here, watch The Price of Free is the documentary to catch a glimpse of his journey on a noble mission. Here we end the chapter. But what is Kailash's latest endeavor? You can see here, after being awarded the Nobel Prize, he with Malala Yousafzai, both of them got the Nobel Peace Prize in that year, 2014. And then this is his latest endeavor to work for children, to protect the world's children against COVID-19. So, call to save children. 88 Nobel laureates and world leaders call for 1 trillion to protect the world's children in the COVID era. So, here's the group that is there with the, this is the emblem. You can see the emblem over here. This is their emblem for that, for which they are working. So, thank you.